You built an empire on fear. This morning, fear built nothing back for you. The phone in your hand has stopped ringing. Not silent by accident, silent on purpose. 12 missed calls to your accountant, and everyone goes straight to a voicemail box that's already full. Your accounts are frozen. Not hacked, not stolen. Frozen quietly by people who knew exactly which levers to pull and exactly when to pull them. You're Luca De Santis. 6 hours ago, men lowered their eyes when you walked into a room. Now, they don't even pick up the phone. You think about the wedding. You shouldn't. Not now, not with everything falling apart around you. But the image comes anyway, uninvited, merciless. Isabella in white, standing at the altar, and the words you said to her in front of 300 people who mattered more to you than she did. You called her a mistake. You called her nothing. You watched her walk out of that church with her spine straight and her eyes dry, and you told yourself that was strength-breaking, not strength-holding. You were wrong. You know that now. You knew an hour after she left, if you're honest, which you rarely are. By midnight, your allies had vanished. By dawn, your empire had folded in on itself like a lung with no air left to give it shape. The men who once called you Don have become ghosts, and ghosts don't answer phones. There's only one place left to go. One person left who might still hold the thread that could stitch this back together. The Fontana estate sits behind iron gates older than your grandfather, gates that have never once opened for you as a man asking instead of a man commanding. You stand there in the gray half-light before sunrise, and for the first time in your life, you feel something you have spent 39 years making sure you never had to feel. You feel small. You lift your hand to knock, to beg, if it comes to that, though the word tastes like poison even in your own head. You never get the chance. The gates begin to move on their own, heavy and slow, iron dragging against stone like something ancient waking up. You go still. A man like you does not walk into open doors without wondering who opened them and why, and what's waiting on the other side. And that's when it hits you, cold and sudden, like a hand closing around your throat. These gates didn't open because you were welcome. They opened because someone already knew you were coming. She isn't waiting at the door. She's waiting past it, deep inside the estate, seated in a chair that faces the entrance like a throne facing a courtroom. And Luca understands the message before a single word is spoken. She didn't come to greet him. She let him walk the whole distance to her. He stands in the doorway of the grand room, and for a moment, old instinct takes over. He straightens his jacket, lifts his chin, prepares to be the man who commands a room simply by entering it. But the guards flanking the walls don't react to him at all. Their eyes stay fixed on Isabella, waiting for her signal, not his. She doesn't rise. That single detail undoes him more than anything else could. Isabella Fontana, the woman he once watched flinch at raised voices, sits with her hands folded and her spine straight, and she does not stand for the man who destroyed her in front of 300 witnesses. Isabella, he starts. She lets him say her name and nothing more. The silence that follows isn't empty. It's deliberate, stretched just long enough to remind him that in this room, speaking first is a privilege she's choosing not to take. He talks. He always talks, explains, justifies, reaches for the version of events where he's still somewhat forgivable. She watches him do it the way someone watches a man dig his own grave with great enthusiasm. When she finally speaks, her voice carries no heat at all. That's what frightens him. He built his reputation on rage, on the threat of violence simmering just under the surface. Isabella offers him none of that. She offers him something worse, the calm of someone who has already won and is simply waiting for him to realize it. "Sit down, Luca," she says. "You want to be sitting for this." He doesn't move. Old pride dying hard. She tilts her head slightly, studying him the way she might study a man she already knows the ending of. "You came here thinking I don't know what happened last night," she says. "The accounts, the calls that stopped coming. Vittoria's little phone call an hour ago." His blood turns to ice. "I know things you haven't even discovered are true yet." He sits, not because she asked twice, she didn't, but because his legs make the decision before his pride can object. The chair across from her feels smaller than it should, like the room itself has shrunk around him. "I lost everything," he says, and the words come out rougher than he intends. The accounts, the alliances, the men who swore loyalty to my father before they swore it to me. Gone. All of it in a single night. Isabella says nothing. She lets him keep going, the way you let a man run out of road on his own. I know what I did to you, he says, and here it comes, the part he hates most, the part that costs him something to say out loud. I know I can't undo the wedding. I know I can't undo any of it. But Isabella, you're the only person left who can stop this. One word from you, and my creditors back off. One word, and the men who vanish come back. He almost reaches for her hand, almost invokes the years before the wedding, the version of them that existed before he chose an empire's optics over a wife's heart. He catches himself just before the word love leaves his mouth, because even now, even here, some small surviving instinct tells him it would be the wrong move. Isabella watches him arrive at the edge of that word and stop. Something flickers behind her eyes, not sympathy. Recognition. You think this happened to you? She says finally. Like weather. Like bad luck arrived at your door uninvited. Isabella. I watched it happen, Luca. Her voice doesn't rise. It doesn't need to. Every account frozen. Every ally that stopped answering. I watched every hour of it unfold, and I let it. The room goes very quiet. You think Vittoria did this to you, she says. You think a woman half my patience and none of my resources brought down an empire built over 3 generations. He stares at her, and something cold starts climbing up the back of his neck. You didn't lose everything because of Vittoria, Isabella says, each word placed like a blade set down deliberately on a table. You lost everything because of me. Across the city, in a penthouse paid for with someone else's guilt, Vittoria stands alone at the window with a phone pressed to her ear and her voice dropped to a whisper, as though the glass itself might report back to Isabella. I've done my part, she says. He's ruined. He's exactly where you wanted him. A pause. Somewhere on the other end, a man exhales like he's savoring the moment before he ruins hers. When will the last Fontana finally die? Vittoria asks. The laugh that answers her is short, almost fond. The way you laugh at someone who still hasn't understood the shape of the thing they're standing inside of. You still don't understand, do you? Vittoria's grip tightens on the phone. You were never hired to destroy Isabella, the voice says. You were hired to distract Luca. The words land slow, then all at once, the way bad news always does. First as sound, then as meaning. She has spent months believing herself the architect of Luca's ruin. The woman clever enough, patient enough, desired enough to pull a De Santis out of his own marriage and into her bed, and from there, into position for a fall she thought she was engineering herself. She was never the architect. She was scaffolding, necessary for exactly as long as the real structure needed her, and not one moment longer. That's not, she starts, but the voice cuts her off, almost gentle in its cruelty. Did you really think we needed you to end Isabella Fontana? A woman who's been 3 steps ahead of everyone in that family's orbit for 30 years. Vittoria says nothing. There's nothing left to say that wouldn't sound like begging. What she doesn't know, what she can't see from her penthouse window, no matter how far she looks across the skyline, is that hidden cameras have been recording this exact call from the moment she dialed. Every word, every whispered question about the last Fontana. Miles away, in a room with the lights kept deliberately low, Isabella watches the live feed without a flicker of surprise crossing her face. She has known about Vittoria since before the wedding invitations went out. The feed cuts to black, and Isabella sits back in her chair, unmoved, as though she's just finished reading a report she already knew the ending of. Because she has. She has known about Vittoria since before the wedding invitations were even printed. 3 years earlier. A different room, a different version of Isabella. Younger, quieter, still learning how to wear the mask of a devoted wife over the face of a woman, counting every exit in every building she entered. She sat beside Luca at galas and dinners, smiling at the right moments. And while he networked with senators and shipping magnates, she watched the edges of every room. She noted who whispered to whom. She remembered names people thought she'd forgotten by morning. 2 years earlier, a private meeting in Zurich that Luca never knew she'd arranged. a man in a gray suit sliding a folder across a table. The first thread in a network Isabella had been quietly stitching together since the day she married into the De Santis name. Bankers, bodyguards, a housekeeper in the De Santis villa who reported not to Luca's mother, but to Isabella. Every one of them recruited not through threats, but through patience, the rarest currency in a world built on fear. 1 year earlier, the night Vittoria first appeared at a De Santis charity dinner, laughing too easily at Luca's jokes, standing a fraction too close. Isabella watched from across the room and felt nothing resembling jealousy. She felt confirmation, a piece sliding into a place she'd already prepared for it, because Isabella never needed a network of spies to tell her Luca was capable of betrayal. She needed one to tell her who was pulling Vittoria's strings and why. She never wanted revenge on Vittoria. That would be like burning down a house to punish the smoke. Vittoria was bait. Bait laid by someone patient enough, powerful enough, and old enough in this war to know that the fastest way to destroy Isabella Fontana wasn't through her business, her allies, or her fortune. It was through her husband's wandering heart. Which means whoever orchestrated this didn't just want Luca ruined. They wanted Isabella distracted, grieving, humiliated, too broken to notice what was coming for her next. They had no idea she'd been 3 steps ahead the entire time. To understand what Isabella has built, you have to understand what was taken from her first. 30 years ago, a villa outside Palermo, the night of September the 14th. The Fontana family gathered for what should have been an unremarkable dinner. Isabella's parents, her 2 uncles, a cousin barely out of university. By midnight, every one of them was dead except a 4-year-old girl hidden inside a linen closet by a housekeeper who would not survive the week that followed. The official record calls it a rival family dispute. A war between old houses, settled in blood the way these things were settled then. For 30 years, that story held. Repeated at funerals, printed in newspapers, accepted by everyone who mattered enough to ask questions and powerful enough to be lied to convincingly. It was never true. The massacre wasn't a war. It was a purchase. Someone paid for the Fontana family's silence on something they'd uncovered. A network moving money through charities, through politicians, through mafia families across 3 countries who all answered, eventually, to the same unseen hand. The Fontanas found the thread. Someone made sure they never lived to pull it. That someone has spent 30 years disappearing into respectability. He does not carry a title that announces him. He sits on boards. He funds campaigns. He has dined with prime ministers who have no idea the man across the table from them ordered a family's execution before their own children were born. He moves between London, Geneva, and Rome the way other men move between rooms in their own house. Comfortable, unwatched, untouchable. For 30 years, he believed the last Fontana was a dead end. A girl raised quietly, married off into another powerful family, absorbed and neutralized by a name that wasn't her own. He was the one who suggested Luca De Santis as a match, all those years ago, working through intermediaries so distant even Luca's own father never knew whose hand had guided the introduction. Marry her into obscurity. Let the De Santis name swallow the Fontana threat hole. Now, watching Vittoria's failure unfold from a room Isabella cannot yet see, he allows himself something dangerously close to satisfaction. He believes Isabella Fontana has already shown him everything she has: a wounded wife, a scattered inheritance, 30 years of grief with nowhere left to go. He has no idea she spent every one of those 30 years building the war that's about to reach his door. Isabella rises for the first time since he walked into the room, and the movement alone tells him this is the part she's been waiting to arrive at. She crosses to a cabinet, unlocks it, and returns with a folder worn soft at the edges from years of handling. She sets it in front of him the way she might set down a verdict. Open it. He does, because refusing feels suddenly more dangerous than knowing. Bank transfers, old ones decades old, routed through 3 shell companies before landing in an account that funded, among other things, the private security detail that guarded a certain villa outside Palermo on the night of September the 14th. The same night, the guards inexplicably stood down for 11 unaccounted for minutes. The signature authorizing the original transfer belongs to Matteo De Santis. His father. No, Lucas says, and it comes out smaller than he intends. This is, you could have built this. Forged it. You've had 30 years to construct whatever story serves you. I have. Isabella agrees, and her calm is the worst part, because it means she isn't trying to convince him of anything. She's simply waiting for him to arrive at the truth on his own. Ask yourself why your father insisted on the marriage. Ask yourself why a man who despised the Fontana name so openly at every dinner table pushed his only son toward it so quietly through channels you never saw. Luca's mind, against every instinct of loyalty he spent 39 years cultivating, begins doing the arithmetic anyway. The introductions arranged by men his father never fully explained. The wedding pushed forward faster than tradition demanded. His father's strange, cold satisfaction the day the engagement was announced. Not warmth, he realizes now, but relief. He knew. Lucas says, the words arriving before he's ready for them. He knew what happened to your family. He didn't just know. He can't finish the sentence. Some part of him is still standing in a doorway 39 years ago, looking up at the man who taught him everything he knows about loyalty, about strength, about what it costs to survive in their world. Your father has spent your entire life teaching you that blood matters more than truth, Isabella says quietly. That the family name survives no matter what it costs everyone standing outside it. She doesn't raise her voice. She doesn't need to. The evidence does the cruelty for her. So now you understand your position, Luca, she says. You came here begging me to save the empire your father built on my family's grave. The room feels smaller than it did an hour ago. Smaller than it's ever felt. You have exactly one choice left worth making, Isabella tells him. The blood that raised you, or the truth that's about to bury him. He doesn't answer right away. He can't. His father's voice arrives first, uninvited, the way it always has at the moments that mattered most. Loyalty is the only currency that doesn't devalue. Luca, family forgives. Family protects. Everyone else is a transaction. He'd said it 100 times growing up, over 100 dinners. And Luca had built his entire understanding of manhood around it without once questioning where that loyalty was supposed to end. He questions it now, because loyalty, he realizes, sitting in this quiet room with a folder of evidence in front of him, was never the virtue his father claimed it was. It was a leash, a story told to a son, so the son would never look too closely at what the father had buried to build the life he inherited. He thinks of Isabella at the altar, the words he chose over her, the applause of men who are ghosts to him now. He thinks of his father's face at the wedding, that same strange relief, and understands, for the first time, that he was never protecting his son's happiness. He was closing a door he'd spent 30 years afraid someone would open. Isabella watches him arrive at all of this without offering him a single word of comfort along the way. She isn't cruel about it. She simply lets the truth do what truth does when a man finally stops running from it. I'm not doing this because I still love you, Lucas says finally, and the honesty of it surprises him more than it seems to surprise her. I don't know if what we had was ever real, or if I destroyed it before I understood what it was worth. I didn't ask you to love me, Isabella says. I asked you to choose. Then I choose truth, he says, even if it buries him. Even if it buries me alongside him. Something shifts in the room. Not warmth, not yet, but the beginning of something closer to alliance than either of them expected to find here. There's something you don't have, Lucas says slowly, the shape of an idea forming as he speaks it. Access. My father trusts almost no one, but he still trusts me. His inner circle, the men who move money for him, the ones who know where the rest of the evidence is buried. They'll open doors for me they'd never open for you. Isabella studies him for a long moment, weighing the offer the way she weighs everything, carefully and without sentiment. That, she says finally, is the first useful thing you've said since you walked through my gates. 48 hours. That's all it takes. Luca moves through his father's inner circle like a man finally seeing the walls of his own house for the first time. A banker in Geneva, nervous, sweating, hands over records he's protected for 2 decades. A lawyer in Rome, cornered, gives up a name he swore he'd take to his grave. Each piece slides into place beside the last. Isabella's network moves in parallel, silent, patient, 30 years in the making. Politicians who owe her favors they don't remember owing. Journalists who've been waiting years for exactly this story. Every thread she planted across a decade begins pulling taut at once. Then Vittoria resurfaces. She arrives at the estate unannounced, no security, mascara streaked, voice shaking. She's not here to apologize. She's here because she's afraid. He's cleaning up loose ends, she says. I'm a loose end. Isabella looks at her for a long moment. Says nothing about betrayal, about the wedding, about the months Vittoria spent playing a part she never understood she was playing. Then help us, Isabella says instead. Or leave and take your chances with him. Vittoria chooses to talk. She gives them the last piece, a name behind the name, an account behind the account, a meeting scheduled in Rome in 6 hours where the mastermind plans to personally oversee the final transfer of assets before disappearing for good. He doesn't know yet that his banker talked. He doesn't know his lawyer talked. He doesn't know Vittoria talked. He walks into that meeting the way he's walked into every room for 30 years, certain, unhurried, believing the last Fontana has already shown him every card in her hand. He is wrong. The room is not empty when he arrives. Isabella sits at the head of the table. Luca stands behind her, no longer the man who begged at her gates, but the man who chose a side and burned the last bridge back. The mastermind's composure cracks for exactly 1 second. Long enough for Isabella to see it, long enough to know she's finally found the version of him no politician or billionaire has ever seen. You planned this, he says slowly. All of it. Vittoria. Luca. The accounts. I planned the ending, Isabella says. You planned everything that led to it. Police move in through the doors he didn't see guarded. Journalists already have the story loaded, timed, ready to detonate across every outlet he spent 30 years controlling. He built an empire on the belief that no one was patient enough to outlast him. He forgot the one person who had 30 years and nothing left to lose. By the time the sun rises over Rome, the empire that murdered Isabella's family 30 years ago no longer exists. The mastermind is in custody, stripped of the anonymity that protected him for 3 decades. The politicians who owed him favors scatter like smoke. Matteo De Santis, Luca's father, is arrested before noon, his empire, the one Luca once believed he'd inherit, dismantled piece by piece under the weight of evidence his own son helped uncover. Vittoria disappears from the story the way pawns do when the game ends. No triumphant redemption. No punishment either. Just a woman who finally understands she was never important enough to be anyone's enemy. Isabella stands on the balcony of the Fontana estate as the last of it unfolds on the news below her. And for the first time in 30 years, there is nothing left to plan for. No thread left to pull. No war left to fight. Luca finds her there. He doesn't reach for her hand. He's learned, finally, that some things aren't his to reach for anymore. What happens now, he asks. Now, Isabella says, I find out who I am when I'm not fighting for something. He nods. He understands, in a way he wouldn't have understood a week ago, that this isn't the part of the story where they fall back into each other's arms. Too much truth stands between them now. His father's blood, her family's grave, the marriage that was never real in the way either of them needed it to be. I don't expect forgiveness, he says. Good, Isabella says, because I wasn't offering any. There's no cruelty in it, just honesty, the same honesty that carried her through 30 years of patient, silent war. He leaves the estate that morning a different man than the one who stood begging at its gates, stripped of an empire, stripped of a father's lies, stripped of every illusion he built his identity on. He walks away from those same iron gates, and this time, no one opens them for him. This time, he opens them himself. You thought losing her was the worst thing that ever happened to you. You were wrong. Surviving her war was only the beginning of understanding everything you'd lost.